Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Hey, friend, and welcome to this episode of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, and today I am here with my co-host, Holly. Hey, Holly.
Hello. How are ya?
I am good. I'm excited to be recording again with you today.
And it feels like a long time.
Yeah, I know. Now that we're only doing 2 episodes a month, it's weird. So
I know, it's
sure.
really weird. Yeah. We have to get used to it.
Okay, so just going to give this disclaimer as we're getting started here that my dog is in my office with me and she is currently chewing her bone very loudly. So if you happen to hear some chewing in the background, I apologize. Otherwise, she was out in the hallway chasing the cats around the house. So I decided to keep her in here.
Well, and my fire alarm just went off. So Who knows whether or not.
We don't know what's going to happen
real
in
life.
This recording today. We apologize. Yeah. All right. So we are going to try to get into a topic today that is going to be really practical and get into something that will hopefully help you in your leadership, no matter what kind of role you have. Because if you are a leader, it's likely that at some point you either are going to be leading a meeting, facilitating some kind of group discussion, or maybe leading people through a project that involves several people and lots of meetings. So we thought it would be fun. Hopefully it'll be fun to talk about leading groups or meetings, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to try to not have this be like a boring conversation. I don't think it will be. Well, our conversations are never boring. What am I saying?
They're never boring.
But,
well, not to us anyway.
No. No, but I mean, the topic, if we're just leading meetings, that doesn't sound that exciting, but I think it's such a valuable skill to develop as a leader. And it's something I've been thinking about lately. So I thought maybe we should just start with talking a little bit about our own experiences of leading groups and meetings. And then we can dive into some of the tips we have.
Yeah.
So
I did just want to say that I totally agree with you that it's a skill. And I feel like there's an art to it too. There's some soft skills related to this too.
For sure.
I've got to hone. So
yeah.
So this feels a little bit like a resume, but I don't care. I'm just going to tell you. So I have led Campus Crusade for Christ group at our college. I led some work teams during campus assignment when I was at Bible college, because when you're at Bible college, not only do you do the, schoolwork, but you also have to do real work. Other actually where your hands get dirty. I've led mission trips. I've co-led women's ministry. I've led Operation Christmas Child at our church. I've led teams at church for various things, lots of various things. Led project teams at work, just get specific projects done, and currently the small group director at our church. So I've had lots of experience running meetings, facilitating them, that sort of thing. So what about you?
So I think this really started for me leading different groups in college. So I led a homeless ministry that we had in college. I think I participated for a year and then I led the following year. And I've led a missions trip in college. And then again, several missions trips, both with youth group and with adults in our church. And then I've led lots of women's small groups. One of my favorite things to do. Also a marriage retreat. My husband and I have led and facilitated a marriage retreat. And then just various meetings and team activities at church. So also like a variety of those types of meetings. And then I guess I should probably mention, like, I've also led like business type meetings in my business over the years with my team or with my clients or things like that. So yeah, for sure. A variety of things. So
I feel like that's a huge part of our businesses is just, I feel like I'm literally leading a meeting every day.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, I didn't even put it on the list, but like literally every week in Uplift, I lead some kind of group meeting. Right. So whether it's a training or a mastermind or a coaching call, I'm facilitating those calls each week. So it's a big part of what I do.
Okay. So now that we've talked about sort of what we've done in the past, what we really need to start with is honestly the most important question of this entire episode. Okay. If this has happened to you, you know why this question is super important. So are you ready for it? Pause for effect. Does this meeting actually need to happen?
Oh, yes. This is a good question, Holly. And this question came to me when I was in the shower this morning. So I was like, wait, we gotta answer that question first.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've all been in the meeting that could have been an email. So now we're talking about all different types of groups, right? So obviously, if you're leading a small group or you have something that's scheduled to meet like a team meeting once a week, of course, you're going to want to do that. But if this is for a specific purpose or it's one-off, you really need to ask this question first and figure out, yes, this meeting needs to happen or no, it doesn't, right? So
yeah.
So we're going to give you some ways to think about whether or not this is necessary or not.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And let me just say, one of the reasons I think this is such an important question is that everybody's time is valuable. And so the people that you're trying to get to come to your meeting, their time is valuable. And so as the leader of the meeting, it's really important that you make sure that you're not misusing people's time and that you're honoring them and respecting their time. And some people just like to chat. Like there are just some people who like to get together and just talk, but that is not a meeting, right?
Yeah.
And that's like a social
gathering
connection. And if you need to have one of those, you can do it, but you get clear on the purpose. So, all right. So we came up with a few types of questions that you sort of can run through when you're evaluating, does this meeting need to happen? Right. So the first one is there a clear reason for the meeting? Do we actually need to connect in person or is this something that could be resolved via a text message, a Slack message, an email, something like that, right? Sometimes there are things that we can discuss and it can happen. It doesn't have to happen in a real hour-long meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing that can help us make this decision is, are there multiple issues that need to be discussed? Sometimes you have multiple things that you can get through quickly, and it might actually be faster to do it in person rather than try to have 35 different emails and Slack messages or texts or whatever. So sometimes actually a meeting is a better idea because you can get through multiple things at once if you have the right stakeholders in the meeting, which is probably really important too, which I don't think that we mentioned this, but do you have all the key players? If you can't get all the key players, it might not be useful to have the meeting at all until you can get them all in the same room. So
yeah, I think that point of like multiple issues being discussed is important because I don't know if you've ever been in one of those email threads that just keeps going and going and going and like reply all. And you're just like, oh my word, can we just get on the phone and discuss this? Because it's actually taking up more of my time and energy to go back and forth. Yeah. And there's just some things that are easier to discuss verbally than trying to explain in writing. Again, because we know that like tone of voice and body language does not come through in an email.
Yeah.
And so some more difficult conversations usually are going to be better in an in-person kind of conversation.
Yeah. I think you can kind of tell if someone's getting worked up on a thread of some kind that it might be better to pause.
Yeah.
Get into a phone call, a meeting and be like, okay, let's reorient where we are because obviously this is an issue.
Yeah.
So,
and, we kind of already addressed this a little bit, multiple issues, but also is the issue or discussion complex and not straightforward? And I have an example of this. I'm working on a project right now with a group of people, and we have been meeting regularly, but we sort of decided to take a little bit of a longer gap between meetings. So I've been sending questions on Slack, and then I'm like, I have multiple questions and multiple things I'm trying to figure out, and then I'm not getting replies. And so I'm like, okay, it's going to be helpful when we have our meeting next week, because I'm going to make sure I get the information I need, because people can't escape you when you're in a group meeting.
So is that another reason we should put here? People can't escape you. This is a good reason to have a meeting.
It's a good reason. If you need to get a real straightforward answer and people are avoiding you, your messages, have a meeting.
I just want to say right now that it's not appropriate to bring people into a room and then lock the door. I just need everyone to know that. Just pause right here and say
no. Oh, man. Okay.
Okay. One other question is, do we want to brainstorm? So sometimes brainstorming or coming up with ideas, you can play off of each other. You can kind of hear the kind of creative atmosphere that's around you, and having a time to brainstorm with a group can be super beneficial, especially if you are having like a year-long planning meeting where you're trying to come up with ideas for events or campaigns or promotions or anything like that. It might be a good idea to get everybody into a room and go over the vision and then brainstorm with each other what sort of things you can do in the future. So,
yeah, I agree. It's much easier, I think, to brainstorm and to just throw out ideas and get a lot of ideas on the table when you're in person in a group. So, yeah. Okay, so the last question I think we should ask ourselves before we have a meeting is it going to hurt or help team morale to hold this meeting? So if your team is already tired, worn out, if you have so many things going on right now that another meeting is just going to be draining for people, that might not be the best idea, right? Or maybe you haven't connected in months. I know for us at church, after like during COVID, like this initial surge of COVID during COVID, anyway, whatever.
Yeah, anyway.
But during the initial surge in the, March 2020, like we did not have an in-person meeting for a long time. Yeah. And so then it started to feel like, man, it's actually hurting us to not meet because we're not connecting. We're not, having that time to evaluate what's going on and how can we work and serve and all of that. So
I think it's important to kind of figure out where the team is at and whether this is going to help or hurt. Sometimes you just do have to bust through something and getting to the other side will actually help. But I've been in meetings where I've walked out and just been like, ugh, I'm so annoyed. Like, and it doesn't help anything. Yeah. It doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. So yeah,
exactly. Okay. So let's get into actually facilitating a meeting. Like we're going to talk about some keys to leading an effective meeting. We're going to talk about some mistakes to avoid, some challenges that you might run into, and then ways to get things back on track when something has gotten off track. So hopefully this is going to be helpful for you again.
Yeah.
So let's start off with talking about some keys. Like we just want to talk about what has worked for you and I, Holly. Again, we're not like experts at facilitating meetings. I mean, we haven't done any formal training on this, but we both have done it a lot and probably made a lot of mistakes and done a few things right. So
we've been in good meetings, I can guarantee you, and we've been in bad meetings, whether we're running them or someone else is running them.
Yes, for sure. Okay. So what do you feel like are some keys to kick us off?
Yeah. So the first one, honestly, this is probably the most important. Is there a clear purpose? Like, why are you even doing this meeting? Do you have clear, attainable goals of what you need to get done in this meeting? Do you have action steps that you need to complete? Do you have a real reason to be there? I mean, it goes back to the same question of whether or not you should have the meeting, but having a clear purpose and stating that purpose at the beginning so everyone knows why they're there is super important. It helps you to kind of get away from bunny trails, helps you to actually get the thing done that you need to be done. Because nothing is worse than getting into a meeting going through the meeting and then realizing you need another meeting to finish the thing that you came to that meeting for.
Yes. Yes. Oh,
I mean, that does happen sometimes when you don't really estimate the goal well and you think it's shorter than it is. I mean, that happens to everybody, but to be a good, effective leader and to hold really good meetings, have a clear purpose and go for it. So,
right. Yeah. Okay. So another thing that goes along with that is to have an agenda, like have a plan for the meeting. Yeah. What's going to be discussed? What are, like you said, what are the key topics that we need to review? What do we need to figure out in terms of next steps at the end of the meeting? Having that written down ahead of time can be really beneficial. And, again, keeping in mind that people all operate differently. This is probably a preference of mine because I do like to have things in writing and I do like written communication, sometimes more than verbal, but it just gets everybody on the same page, right? If everybody can look at the same piece of paper and know, or the same screen, whatever, and know, okay, here is the goal, here's the things we're going to try to get through, then no one is just like imagining in their head a totally different outline for the meeting than what you're planning.
Right. And I've been to meetings where everyone has a different agenda. So
yes.
So everyone having the same agenda, I think is really good.
Yeah.
The other thing that may work is someone to facilitate the discussion. Now, I think that this depends a little bit. Sometimes if you're running the meeting, that's you. But if you're solving a specific problem and there is someone in the room that has more knowledge about the problem, more knowledge about the topic, perhaps they're the best person to facilitate that discussion. Even if you're facilitating the whole meeting, it's really great to volley it off to someone else and say, hey, can you guide this discussion so that we stay on task? And again, this is the same, kind of along the same thing, is having the right key players in the room to facilitate the discussion. So if you have someone that has the most knowledge, they should be there for that discussion. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And learning to facilitate conversations is one of those skills that it takes time, it takes practice. And there are actually, like, I'm sure there are trainings and things you can go through to learn this. A lot of what I have learned has been, I think, just through actual experience.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that come into play with facilitating, and it's not just about who is the actual leader of the organization. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the leader isn't the best facilitator for the meeting because, sometimes there might be someone else who could facilitate the conversation and allow the leader to actually share more than what they could if they were trying to facilitate too. So,
and I think facilitating too, you have to have the right person. Sometimes people will dominate. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that in a minute, but a good facilitator is someone who can encourage discussion and can ask really thoughtful questions.
Yes.
And who can help people develop ideas and develop thoughts. And they don't really trample on other people who are trying to talk. So,
yeah. Okay. So another factor for an effective meeting is to have a designated time frame for the meeting.
Yes.
Right? Oh, how have you ever been to a meeting, or even like I can think of times where I've been to maybe a church service or like something else that has no designated end time. Yes. And there's always that question of, okay, when is this going to wrap up? Mm-hmm. And again, along the lines of making sure that you're respecting people's time, I think saying, hey, this meeting is going to go for 1 hour, or this meeting is going to be 2 hours, or whatever it is, like that just helps people to be on the same page. It also helps you to stay on track, because if you don't have a designated end time, then you will talk about one topic for an hour and a half, and then still have 10 more topics to get through.
Yeah.
Because if there's no constraints, you expand to the space you have. Right?
Yeah.
So one of the, whatever it is, there's a principle, a scientific principle that says that.
I like that.
You expand to the time that you have. And if there is no end time, then you keep using the time until people just start like falling asleep. So
yeah. I think too, it helps people stay engaged if they know when things are going to end. If it's just like unending and you don't know, it's so easy to just like fall out and kind of take a minute to rest.
Yes.
Whatever you want to call that. But having people engaged for the entire time frame, I think is super important. So
yeah.
I think one of the other things that's worked well for us is, does everyone understand their role on the team? So knowing their role and what they're responsible for, how they are to get a piece of this project done or help facilitate the goal, having well-known roles will help people understand what things they're supposed to be bringing to the table in the meeting. If it's kind of the Wild West and nobody knows, that's great for a brainstorming meeting. But if you have specific action steps that need to get done, a specific project that you're trying to push forward, everyone understanding what their role is super duper important. Now, that's not to say that you squash collaboration in any way, shape, or form, but at the same time, understanding who's responsible for what and whose job it is to take those specific things over, I think is super important. Because have you ever been to a meeting where someone's like, okay, who's going to handle that? And it's literally like silence because no one wants to do it. So you're like, so we just talked for 45 minutes. We figured out what our action plan was, and now no one wants to do it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, for sure. Okay. So let's see. We also want to make sure that the meeting is fun and personal. There's some sort of connection. And I will say this is one of my weaknesses because I am a task-oriented person. So I am sometimes just like, let's not even talk about how everybody's doing. Let's just get down to business. But that's an area of growth for me. And I think I've gotten better over the years. But we always start off with food at our leadership meetings because it's like everybody loves food. Right. Yep. So if we can just like start with a meal, it's just conversation and food. And then we get into the topic. Or maybe if you're leading some sort of other meeting, maybe you do an icebreaker or a team building thing, just gets people more comfortable and makes it a little bit more personal.
And I think like when you talked about, the leadership team not having been together for a long time and you're coming back towards after COVID, or after the initial part of COVID, whatever. You kind of need to make space for the fact that that personal time is going to take a little bit longer. If you just met yesterday, maybe you don't even need to. So I think that's a soft skill that you kind of understand where the team is at, where the group is at. And, if it's your weekly small group, of course, you're probably going to have an icebreaker question and some cookies. Like it doesn't have to be crazy, but understanding that some meetings may need more personal time, some may need less or even zero, depending on the team. So I think that's a soft skill too, to understand.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that helps effective meetings is to create a safe environment where no answer or suggestion is wrong or stupid. And making sure that you within yourself are actually willing to hear other opinions. Because sometimes, I don't know if you've been in a meeting like this, it's like, I don't know why we even had this meeting because they didn't care about our opinions and they were just going to do whatever they wanted to do anyway. And basically, this was just a meeting to tell me what I needed to do. And you could have outlined that in an email or given me a task on our project management software. Make sure that if you're actually doing this, you do want people's opinions and that they're not wrong or stupid. And I think that squashing someone, I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting, someone is vulnerable and they say, hey, what if we do this? And then the very next person pipes up, we've tried that, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? That can be really detrimental to people who are either new to the team or have a different type of personality. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to create a safe environment. And even if you don't end up doing it, even if the suggestion was outlandish, you can still honor someone's willingness to contribute to the team and say, hey, thanks for trying to think about that. We thought about it and it's probably not going to work, but maybe next time you could think about this, this, and this. I think it's important to create a safe place where people feel like they can contribute in a meaningful way.
For sure. That's so important.
Yeah.
I think you said it well. I won't reiterate.
Okay. So we talked about some principles that help you create effective meetings, but now we're going to talk about some mistakes that you can avoid. And I think these happen often. So let's just jump right into it. Do you want to do the first one?
Yeah. This is one of my favorites. Okay. It's one of my most pet peeves about meetings.
There you go.
It's when we go and we start to go down a rabbit trail, a bunny trail, whatever you want to call it, that's not really necessary at the time. We get into the weeds of a project. We start to try and fix this minuscule little issue that really isn't the purpose of the meeting. It kind of goes back to getting completely off track from the original intent of the meeting and the agenda of the meeting. So that's a mistake. It's easy for it to happen. I mean, it's like so easy for this to happen because somebody might share an idea and then you might start talking about that idea. And then you might start talking about all the ins and outs of that idea. And before you know it, you're like planning something that's going to happen like 6 years from now. And it has no relevance to like right now in the moment, the problem we're actually trying to solve. Right.
Yeah.
So that would be one mistake to avoid. And again, if you're the facilitator of this meeting, or the leader of this meeting, it's going to take some practice on how to bring it back on track when it goes off like that. But again, part of that can happen when you haven't set the clear intention from the start of the meeting. And that can make it easy for everybody to sort of just trail off because no one really knows why they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a super practical tip for people. If you have a team that is really prone to this, or you have something you super need to get done and you can't take the time for these types of distractions, start the meeting off and give everyone a blank piece of paper and a pen. And at the very top, you're going to write parking lot. When someone's speaking, if someone comes up with an idea that is not quite on topic, doesn't really need to be discussed, they're going to write it on the parking lot. And so if someone comes down or starts going down a bunny trail, you can say, hey, we talked about this at the beginning. I'm going to stop you right there. That's not really central to what we're talking about. Do you mind putting it on the parking lot so we don't forget it and we can come back to it? That honors the person's thought or suggestion, but doesn't derail you. And then if you have time in the meeting, you can say, hey, at the very end, kind of like a Q&A, but like, hey, does anyone want to share anything from their parking lot? Or is there anything that we need to address from some people's parking lots? And I think it's super important to give people an outlet for those things, because I know before I've had really great thoughts during a meeting, and because I didn't write it down, I forgot it later on. So it's a great way to start the meeting and set that up from the beginning. So
yeah, that's such a good suggestion.
Okay. So the next thing is lack of agenda or time frame for meeting and not staying on track, which is similar to what we just talked about. But basically not having an agenda is difficult for some people. They need to know that their topic is going to get addressed at some point, or, they want to know how long the meeting's going to go. We talked about the fact that it's easier for people to engage if they know that they only have to do it for a certain amount of time. So not having an agenda or a specific time frame can be difficult and can almost lead people to disengaging. So it's really important to have a set plan for what you're going to do during that meeting and the things you need to get done during that meeting or decide on. So
yeah, I love that. Okay. So another one, and this is kind of funny because like we gave the tips and now we're sort of giving the opposite of the tips.
Yeah. Right.
So, we don't want to reiterate too much, but another mistake to avoid is just having that lack of connection. So we talked about making it personal, making it fun. But if you don't do that, if you're just so focused on the agenda and you're not allowing any time for any kind of connection, then that is going to be a tougher meeting to get through. And again, it also depends on the context of the meeting. I'm guessing that in corporate meetings, they may not spend a whole lot of time on like checking in with everybody and seeing how you're doing, but they might still have like some food and some snacks or something, right? Yeah. That just makes it a little bit less like rigid. So having a lack of connection will make the meeting probably harder for people to get through.
Yeah. So this next one is a huge pet peeve of mine. So not wrapping up the meeting with a plan or clear direction for moving forward. And if you're ever in a meeting with me and this happens, I'm going to be like at the very end, okay, so what are we supposed to do? Like, I'll be the person that's going to ask that, because I really don't like the confusion that comes from walking out of a meeting. And for a fact that there are people who have a very different view of how that meeting went and what's supposed to happen out of it. So it's really important to have a clear action step, a clear plan, a clear task, and figure out who's going to do what and assign all of that before you ever walk out of the meeting. And then if there's any questions, people can go back to those things that hopefully you've written down and reorient themselves to what the plan is moving forward. Now, obviously things may need to change, but that's the whole point of the meeting, is to come up with these action steps to be able to move forward. Yeah. So it's really important to clarify, eliminate confusion, and have those action steps walking out of the meeting.
Yeah. I mean, this is like a project management skill that not everybody has. Right. And I love that you brought up that, people walking away with very different perspectives of what's the plan is, because it makes me think about marriage and how you and your spouse can have a conversation and you can make a plan and you can be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Yeah. And then you talk about it a week later and what you thought and what your spouse thought was happening is entirely different. And that's just two people. Yeah. So if you have a group of 7 people, you could have 7 different ideas of what was happening, who was responsible, all of that. Yeah. And if you don't outline it and get it in writing, then everybody is making assumptions about what's happening. The next mistake to avoid is not connecting the reason for the meeting to the overall vision and goal of your team, of whatever the organization is doing, right? So again, it just goes back to having that clear intention, the clear purpose. If you don't do that, people are going to be less interested in being a part of the meeting if they don't really understand the reason and the connection to the vision and the goal of your church, of your ministry, of your business, whatever you're doing.
I think it's like defining the why, right? Like we talk about that in business, like why are you even having a business? So defining the why are we even having this meeting? Why does this go along with the long-term goal, that sort of thing. So I think it's defining the why for people, and then they can directly understand what their ownership is in that based on their role, based on, whatever within the organization. So I think that's, you're really creating a why for the person, which again is going to lead to them being more engaged. So the last thing is not taking into consideration different learning styles and processing time. So this one is a little bit more of, not a little bit. This is a lot more of a soft skill. And I'm not saying that we have to cater to everyone, but understanding that some people are not good at brainstorming. They need time to process. They need time to think. And, you could have a really awesome brainstorming meeting, and then a day later, someone comes up with 5 new ideas. It's because they need time to process. Or if you're verbally giving out teaching or verbally communicating the issue that you're working through, some people may have a hard time processing that. They need it written, or they need, something else. So the reason I say that is because so many times I've been in meetings, they're like, well, this person didn't contribute at all. And it's like, okay, but have we considered their learning style or their processing time? And I think that that's something to take into consideration when we are expecting certain things out of people. And, obviously we want people to be engaged in part of the process, but I think this is something to at least have in the back of your mind as you're thinking through how you're presenting and what you're expecting of people to come out of the meeting with and to contribute to the goal or the decision that you need to make. So,
yeah. And along with that, this is another advantage of having an agenda in writing. And I've been part of teams before where that gets sent out a day before. So people actually have time to think about it before they even get to the meeting. And that's really helpful for some people, like you said, that take a little bit longer to process. If they know, we're going to be trying to come up with ideas for how to, increase our sales in Q2, then maybe they can actually be thinking about it in advance rather than on the spot in the meeting.
Yeah, I just think it's something to consider because, if you and I were given something to have ideas about, I would need to talk it out and you would need 5 minutes to write it down. You know what I mean? And so if you're having a brainstorming meeting and you're seeing someone off to the side writing stuff, you're like, why aren't they engaged? And it's because they may be processing. They need to write it down before they say it out loud. So it's just something to consider and think about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about some challenges that we can sometimes run into when leading a meeting. There's some good ones here, right, Holly? So we're going to talk about a few challenges and maybe just ideas on what you can do to deal with that situation. Yeah. So I'm going to let you kick it off.
Yeah. So we've all been in the meeting where one person talks the entire time and they say things like, I really want to know your opinion and but then they give their opinions and continue talking for 45 minutes. And you're like, hey, did you actually want to know what we thought? Or, one person just going forward with their agenda. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable and it's not cool.
Yeah. So what do you do? What do you do when one person is dominating, Holly? Oh, assuming it's not you, the facilitator, assuming it's a team member that just thinks they're all that.
Yeah. So, honestly, I'm kind of blunt when it comes to this. I would say, hey, thanks so much. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'd love to give some other people some time to give their opinions and see what they have to say. So if you don't mind letting other people talk for a minute, like, honestly, I have no problem saying that. I know other people would find that too blunt. So you kind of need to come up with a way to say that gently or what's comfortable for you. The other thing you could say is, hey, Susie, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'd love to hear what Esther has to say.
Yeah.
Something simple like that.
There's been times in a small group situation where, you're meeting multiple weeks in a row and you really get to know people that way. And you get to find out who is the first question answerer every single week, right? And they're always like, they were the kid that sat on the front row at school and they raised their hand on every question. Yeah. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing. And they're usually not doing it with any ill intention at all.
Right.
But some people just really have lots of ideas and they're really willing to speak up. Mm-hmm. So what I have done, which I'm not always as direct as you, but I might say something like, hey, so has anybody who hasn't answered a question yet like to share their thoughts? Yeah. So you're sort of like trying to discreetly, I mean, it's going to be obvious for the person who keeps answering, but that's just a way to like try to call other people out into the conversation. Yeah. And it would say if it continually happens and if this person doesn't respect the direct or indirect guidance on stopping, then that might need to have a private conversation outside of the meeting to say, hey, listen, like I know that you have been really sharing a lot of great ideas and thoughts, and I love that. My concern is that other people aren't getting to share their feedback. And I really need to make sure that as the team or as our group, that we all have chances to share. So I'm going to need you to maybe hold back on some of your answers moving forward.
Right. Not an easy conversation to have, but really important in leadership.
Yeah. Right. So next one is some people never speaking up or sharing their thoughts. So the opposite side of the coin is those people who are just the quiet type and introverted and they don't speak up. And so again, with this one, this is again going to be a soft skill, because what you don't want to do is put someone on the spot who is going to get completely embarrassed and flustered and have a hard time knowing what to do or say. Yeah. But if you get to know people a little bit, you can sense when it's okay to call on someone directly and, or, just to do that, what I kind of said before, like, I'd love to hear from anyone else who hasn't shared yet. Is there anyone else who wants to say something before we move on? And like letting there be silence. And then that awkward silence sometimes is the space that person needs to feel comfortable speaking up.
Yeah. I think as meeting facilitators, being okay with some silence is something you have to get used to and get comfortable with. So the next challenge is people becoming defensive or angry. I'm sure we've all been in this meeting. That is definitely a challenge. Some things that are helpful, I think, are using I statements instead of you statements, like saying you're getting really angry is not helpful, but saying it seems to me like this is really important to you. How can we talk about this in a calmer way? Or, something like that, like doing anything to de-escalate or diffuse. And sometimes it may be to the extent where you need to table the issue and move on to something else and then circle back with that person. Oftentimes, there's a reason they're getting angry or upset. They feel vulnerable. They feel attacked. They feel like they dropped the ball, something along those lines. And so there's often something deeper that needs to be addressed outside of the meeting. One of the things I will say that I don't know that we talked about, but I'm going to address it here, is don't call people out during meetings. Like, there are really good ways to address something in a group, but it's not okay to go after someone directly in a group of people. If it's a one-on-one issue or you think there's something deeper, you need to have that question outside of the group. It's not okay to go after somebody in a group setting. It's embarrassing for them and it doesn't look good on you. And it doesn't make you a trustworthy leader. It makes you look like someone who's willing to attack. And that's not going to get you anywhere. So I know that that's a little bit different than the other thing, but I think it kind of goes along with it and is kind of one whole soft skill. So
yeah. And it's awkward for everyone else. It's
yes.
so awkward when a leader is like addressing a problem in a group scenario with one person.
Oh, so awkward. Yeah.
It's just, it feels bad. So, yeah.
So these last two, I think, go together. I don't know if you want, like, I know you're going to talk about them, but they're kind of the same.
Well, why don't you talk about them? Because I think you came up with them. So you probably are better at
I'll talk about
talking
okay.
about them.
So the last two, I'll just say them both and then we can kind of talk about them. Yeah. Not addressing the elephant in the room and not being sensitive to the atmosphere. So have you ever been in a group where something really crazy is happening and you go into a meeting and no one addresses it? You're expected to just ignore what's happening and move on. Sometimes your group of people may need a minute to debrief if there's something that's going on. They need a minute to share their feelings, to process with each other, what have you. But by not addressing the elephant in the room, you have people who have split. I don't know how else to say this, but their minds are split. On one side of their minds, they're processing the thing that's happened, the thing that no one's talking about. And on the other hand, they're trying to focus on what the meeting is actually about. So if you don't address the elephant in the room, it's really hard for people to focus. And oftentimes that's, somebody just got fired and they were just escorted out. Like, you can't go in and then talk about,
and then suddenly you're missing a person in the meeting and
your regular
we're not talk about
meeting. Yeah. So it's not necessarily like you have to go into detail, but you can say, hey, Joe is just fired. I know it's really uncomfortable for you guys, but let's talk through it for a minute and then we'll move on, right? Ignoring that stuff is not healthy for anybody. And that goes along with being sensitive to the atmosphere in the room. So if you can tell that people are uncomfortable, people are shifting in their seats, they're kind of looking down, they're not looking directly at you, they're kind of having side conversations that are like hushed and nervous, you need to be sensitive to the atmosphere. So I think those things are important to address, move forward. And if you need to derail the meeting or postpone it, sometimes you have to do that. So
yeah. I mean, there's been times I've been in a meeting where, there's tears. Someone is upset visibly. And again, I can think about small groups. I can think about other types of meetings. And, you as the leader, you need to pay attention to that. And it's whether it's saying, hey, listen, can you and I chat after the meeting? I'd love to connect. And like, at least acknowledging something's going on and not just like barreling through. But again, you don't want to call someone out and embarrass them to the point of like, oh my goodness, that was awkward kind of thing too. So being sensitive, so key. Okay, so let's talk about how we can get things back on track if something does go wrong in a meeting, right? What are some things that we can do to get the meeting back on track or get the relationship back on track?
So I have kind of a strict view about this next one. If you need to apologize, you need to apologize. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, if you are the leader of the meeting, you are responsible for the meeting. So if something has gone off track, if something has moved aside, something awkward happened, whether it's your fault or not, if you didn't handle that well, you need to apologize. And so I think that's super important. And you might say, well, this person blew up. It's not my fault. Oh, I get that. But it's our job to keep everyone safe, to stay on track, and to show leadership in this meeting. And sometimes leadership is saying the things that no one else wants to say, saying the hard things. And so if you've let something go on too long, or you didn't protect the safety of others or what have you, the very first thing you need to do is apologize. And if you lay blame on someone else, that's not taking responsibility, and that's not showing leadership or ownership. It's okay to recognize that maybe you weren't the start of it, but you need to be the end of it. Does that make sense? So I feel very strongly about this one. And do you have maybe a softer opinion on that, or do you kind of agree?
I feel like I basically agree with you.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the Christ-like thing to do. Yeah. And to not try to shift the blame to someone else. Yeah. I think it's important.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might be apologizing to the group. And then maybe the next thing that we have as a way to get things back on track is having one-on-one conversations if needed. And so it might be that you need to connect with some of the team members one-on-one if someone was particularly upset, or if there was a particular exchange between you and I, Holly, that happened in the meeting. Like, we probably need to have that. We need to have a follow-up conversation about what happened, how it transpired, and how we can move forward in a different way. So those are really important as a way to get things back on track.
Yeah. I think the most brave thing you can do is have a one-on-one conversation, which are often hard. But if you have a hard time having difficult conversations, Esther has some resources that might help you have difficult conversations. So
that's right. I actually was just thinking that we totally did not put in a sponsor for this episode, but we'll go ahead and share it here.
Conversations. Yeah.
Confident Conversations is my mini course. And earlier we talked about needing to talk to people one-on-one or have a hard conversation. And that really, that course is designed to help you as a leader be able to navigate that and figure out how to actually go about doing it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. The next thing to do to get things back on track is to take a break or a breather and reset. So sometimes if things get tough or there's tension in the room, it's okay to say, hey, let's everyone take a 5-minute break and we'll come back to it. If someone needs a minute to calm down, that's totally fine. I think the other thing too is if a meeting goes for a super long time, really there should be a bathroom break. There should be a break for a minute for people, because they're going to get antsy. They're going to stop engaging and they're going to have a hard time focusing. So it's really important to have breaks. Even if you feel like you can power through, give someone the mental break, especially if you're going at something really hard. That's a lot of mental gymnastics. It's good to, give everybody a breather and reset. And then when it's time to come back, it's a really good idea to recap. Okay, we've gotten this far. We have this much left to do. These are the things we need to focus on moving forward to get this done. So don't be afraid to take a break.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to also come back to the vision or goal. So if you are in the midst of a meeting and it feels like things are just sort of all over the place, everybody's confused, just restating, hey guys, let's just remind ourselves what we're here for and why we meet, why we're a team, why we're an organization, whatever it is. Like, this is our vision. This is where we want to go. That's what we're trying to focus on here. So just reiterating that, I think, can help people just reset what the purpose is.
Yeah. I think, again, like exactly what you're talking about, sort of reiterate the why and get them bought into that again, I think is important, because when we get off track, it's hard sometimes to find our way back to the vision or goal. So I'm going to skip the next one because I think you can answer that one. I'm going to talk about the one after that, because I wrote that. So maybe you need to have a talking stick. You ever been in those meetings where people talk over each other and everyone's got an idea, and it's like my family, my dad's French family on that side, literally we're all around the table and there's 35 conversations going on. That's not effective for a meeting. So I believe it was in a movie somewhere. I don't remember where it was, but it's basically a stick. And if you have the stick or this item, whatever it is, it's your turn to talk. No one else can talk unless they have that stick. It's kind of like, it makes me think of like, I don't know, in like, I think it's like congressmen. They're like, will you yield the floor to the...
Yes.
Sometimes you have to have a visual representation of whose turn it is to talk. So, yeah.
Okay. So the next one is setting clear guidelines and parameters and sticking to them. So again, you might just need to get really clear on the guidelines of the group. And actually, we didn't say this at the beginning, the keys to a successful meeting, but I would say this is one of them, which is helpful. But, you know, like, for example,
we're talking about it now.
When I have led a small group, I have started off with, hey, this is a group where XYZ things apply. So it's probably usually going to be confidentiality within the group. It's going to be no wrong questions, ask any question that you want. And so with a meeting, you know, having a few established just operating guidelines for how you run the meeting is important. So again, it's like respecting someone else when they're speaking. That's like a normal guideline. And you might need to reiterate those guidelines if things have gotten off track. Hey, just as a reminder, if someone else is speaking, please wait until they're done to share your thought. You know, jot it down on your parking lot for now if you have the idea and you can't wait to get it out of your head.
Yeah. So I think the next one kind of goes along with this. It's reestablish a safe place to share ideas. So if that's been something that's been violated and that is the thing that you need to reset on, it's okay to say, hey, like just exactly like what you said, this is a safe place to share ideas. Let's not say no right away. Let's keep an open mind. Let's explore options, you know, all of those things. So it's okay to reset that guideline and reset the guidelines so that the people who were violated, victimized, feel like, okay, this is safe again. And it kind of helps the people who did that recognize what happened and not do it again. So I don't know if that was the right word, but.
Well, when you share an idea and it gets trampled right away, it makes you feel like my idea is not valued. My idea doesn't count. And you're less likely to share your ideas in the future.
Yep.
And so it's really important to not have that happen in meetings because that's really disheartening. It's demoralizing for the team and especially for that individual. So yeah, I think that setting that guideline and that boundary of this is a place where you can share your ideas doesn't mean we're going to be able to do every idea or, you know, we're not going to necessarily always agree on things, but we want people to share. So there's value there.
Yeah. So the last way to get back on track is not to expect people to operate outside of their strengths. I think expectation is a huge thing. So if you're doing a small group and there's someone that doesn't pray or doesn't like to talk, you're probably not going to ask that person to lead the group next week and create their own Bible study, right? So don't expect people to operate outside of their strengths. Now, there's a caveat to that. It's okay to ask people to take a next step or to push their comfort zone a little bit, but it's not okay to single out that person and say, hey, can you write a Bible study for next time? You know, This kind of goes along with the processing time, learning styles. Again, it's okay to ask people to push their comfort zone, but not okay to ask someone to completely work outside of their strength, and knowing what those are, I think is super important. So expectation is really important when getting back on track. I'm sorry, I had the wrong expectation of you. How can we facilitate you growing in this area without me putting you on the spot or asking you to go too far outside of that? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So hopefully this conversation has been helpful for you, regardless of what role you might play in leadership. You know, again, at some point, whether you have already done this or not, you know, you probably will be leading some sort of group or meeting or something. And these points we hope have been helpful for you to think about and think through. What we want you to do, because this is a podcast where we want you to actually develop in your leadership and grow. Yes. So we want you to choose one aspect of leading meetings that you want to improve on or develop. And hopefully we will actually have a post about this in the Facebook group when this episode airs. And so you can share what area of leading are you going to focus on? Are you going to try and get clear on the purpose of the meeting? Are you going to try to set clear guidelines? Like identify something that you can implement in your next meeting that you lead. That's the call to action.
I think it's a good one. If you were picking this, what would you pick?
Oh.
I put you on the spot.
You did. You put me on the spot. That's one of the no-nos, Holly.
Well, I can say that I have to watch myself that I don't talk too much in domineering conversations. Yeah. So I've gotten better at that. But yeah,
I think for me, it would be what I said when we were having the conversation is making it personal, making it fun, like including some sort of fun, because I'm just not I'm not naturally
You're all business
to fun.
You want to get it done.
I have to work at being creative and coming up with ideas to make things fun.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay. Speaking of fun.
Mine. Yeah.
Our fun question.
Fun question of the episode. Woohoo.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Brian, please cut that out and play that every time before we do a fun question. That is our soundbite now. I love it.
I have to just tell you one thing. I have been listening to the Office Ladies podcast. Do you know what that is?
I know what it is, but I haven't listened to it.
It's two of the actresses from The Office who played Pam and Angela. They're actually best friends in real life, Angela and Jenna. That. And they have a podcast and they go through all the episodes and they're always making these silly, like little snippets to go before like different segments of their podcast. So
you just created our first one.
We haven't done that yet. All right. Fun question. Okay. What is our fun question?
Mm-hmm. Do you like roller coasters?
Yes.
No.
You don't? That's right. I knew that because we've had conversations because the day this episode goes out, guys, when you're listening, if you are a diehard and you are listening on Tuesday, February 22nd, when this episode releases, according to our current plans,
I love that caveat.
It could actually change, but I think this is going out that day. We are going to be somewhere together, aren't we, Holly?
Yes, we are. We're going to be at Universal Studios in Florida.
Yeah.
So this question is very pertinent.
It is because I am going to want to go on the roller coasters.
Yes.
Probably what's going to happen is I'm going to go on roller coasters with your husband and your son. Yeah. And you are going to hang out with my husband and my daughter. Yeah. And you non-roller coaster people will be doing boring stuff while us fun people are having fun.
So I do have to say that I do not dislike rides. Okay. And I have to say that I'm going to use air quotes, my roller coaster liking, I don't know what you want to call it, is mostly for like Disney rides. Like, and pretty much I can handle I don't want to say pretty much anything. Like I don't like Tower of Terror. I don't like drop rides. Okay. But like, I can ride 80% of the rides at Disney parks, 80 to 90%. But we had season passes to Busch Gardens for a year or so. Yeah. And I could really only go on like 2 rides. And one was the train that went around the park.
Busch Gardens has like the loop-de-loops and the upside down and
real rides.
Yeah. That's what I like. That's what I want to do.
No. When I get scared, I faint. So I have been on rides before where I'm literally like, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint. And I'm like about ready to.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting what happens when we're in the parks together. We'll see what happens. We'll have to post some pictures.
Scott's not a roller coaster.
No,
person.
He does not
like
really
at all.
I mean, he will go on them, but he does not love them.
Okay.
He does not love them. He will do them, but our daughter will not do them.
I'm hoping that she'll do like some of the rides, like It's a Small World and Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff like that. Because I mean, those are literal boat rides.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Okay.
It's going to be. We'll see. It's okay.
Anyway, we're not going to expect her to operate outside of her strengths.
Right.
Yes. Right.
But we might push just a little bit.
Maybe if she has the outside stimulus of her friend wanting to go on the ride, that may help her a little bit.
Friends help everything.
Yes.
So. All right. So we're going to need to know for those in the Purposeful Leadership Facebook group.
Yep.
Do you like roller coasters? We're going to have to find out and see the percentage of, people that like them versus not. We'll have to do like an actual poll. So we can get,
Yeah.
Okay.
Good
Great. Plan.
Okay. Whose job is it to create the poll? We have to leave this meeting with.
I don't know can you pre-schedule a poll because I'm going on vacation.
I know we need to pre-schedule it, but I don't know if you can pre-schedule a poll. That's our action step. Find out if we can pre-schedule a poll.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway. On that note, thank you for being here to the very end of this episode. We thank you for being part of our podcast community. And I will say one last thing. If you have been enjoying our podcast, whether you are brand new or whether you have been here for 3.5 years, please share it with a friend. Yeah. Like tell someone else about it. Maybe you know someone who's really bad at leading meetings and you need to send them this episode as a suggestion.
That might not be the best. Not be appropriate.
No, sorry. Take it back. You send them a different episode.
Yes.
A couple episodes ago, and maybe they'll just keep listening and they just will happen to get to this one. And they'll never know.
Hey, did you listen to episode number whatever? Wasn't it so good?
Yeah, I loved it. I learned so much. Yeah. Okay.
That seems a little bit manipulative, Esther.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, disregard the last 5 minutes of this conversation and just share this podcast with a friend. No hidden agenda.
And join our Facebook group.
That's right.
Because we're going to figure out how to schedule a poll in the group to answer the question, do you like roller coasters?
These are the important issues of the day.
Yes. Yeah.
They are. Yes.
They're pivotal. Pivotal.
Okay. Ryan, save that clip and repost it every week.
Pivotal.
Pivotal. Okay. Well, with that note, we're really going to end now. So
yes, we are.
Thank you for listening and we will talk to you next time. Hi, friend. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. We're so glad you took the time out of your day to listen, and I truly hope that it made an impact on your ability to lead well. If it did, would you consider sharing this episode with a friend? You could take a screenshot of the episode and share it on your social media, maybe an Instagram story or on Facebook, or you could just text the link to a friend. We would truly appreciate that, as when you share with a friend, it helps spread the word about the podcast and it helps more women to be able to be impacted so that they can lead and love others well. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.
They're pivotal.